my name is Miriam Bryant, and this year for CSA Day, I researched the concept of non-binary language in Spanish. I was very curious about the intersection between gender and language, and I wanted to know more about the non-binary identity within a highly gendered language like Spanish. Here's what I'll be going over today, and let's get started. In early Spanish classes, students are taught about colors, numbers, letters, basic pronunciation, and gender. However, the current curriculum does not currently include any instruction regarding gender, Spanish gender pronouns that may help students identify themselves or anyone else outside of the binary. This is due to the lack of any official non-binary language in Spanish. Being gendered correctly is an important part of being trans, and being misgendered causes significant psychological distress that can lead to a variety of other issues. And because of this, Spanish teachers should consider non binary students by broadening lessons on gender and pronouns to include the non binary identity. In this presentation, I'll discuss the existing options for non-binary inclusive Spanish, summarize some of the disadvantages associated with these possibilities, offer some suggestions for how to implement more inclusive environments for non-binary Spanish speakers, and I'll locate a starting place for classroom conversations about the topic, as well as dispel any misinformation. I believe that everyone deserves respect and understanding regardless of their gender identity or the language that they speak. I will be using the following terms throughout the rest of the presentation. Sex is defined as someone's external genitalia. So this is what is celebrated at gender reveal parties, which should really be called sex reveal parties. Gender is a set of socially constructed expectations for behavior and characteristics, and it forms an individual's part of an individual's social identity, and it can be fixed or fluid. Sex and gender are often used interchangeably, so it's important to understand that they're actually separate concepts. In the simplest terms, sex is physical and gender is mental. All right, and the next ones we have transgender, and this refers to a person's gender identity that does not match the sex that they were assigned at birth. And non-binary is an umbrella term that represents people who are not men or women. Cisgender is a term for someone whose gender identity does match the sex that they were assigned at birth. Misgendering is when a person is addressed or described using language that does not match their gender identity. Gender expression, how you express your gender through the way that you walk, dress, speak, and language that you use for yourself. Gender expression does not depend on gender identity. And gender dysphoria is a diagnosis sometimes used by psychologists or doctors that describes the anguish, unhappiness, or anxiety that transgender people may feel about the incompatibility between their body and their gender identity. A few important notes to make here is that misgendering is not always intentional, and it can be considered a microaggression in some contexts. Gender expression can look any way. For example, two people can both identify as women, but choose to express that identity very differently, like long hair and dresses or short hair and pants. Gender expression is also very dependent on social standards, time period, and geographical location. Additionally, while gender dysphoria is a diagnosis, it's essential to remember that being transgender is not considered by medical professionals to be a mental illness. It seems unrelated, but the 2008 Disney Pixar movie WALL-E illustrates the difference between sex and gender quite perfectly. The main characters are robots without any human sex characteristics. However, the majority of viewers assume that WALL-E, the robot on the left, is a boy, and Eve, the robot on the right, is a girl. Here you can clearly see how gender and sex are separate concepts. They do not have human sex characteristics, but their gender expression, their shape, color, attitude, cues the audience into what pronouns to use for them. Now we know what it means to be transgender or non-binary, and we can discuss the impact of being misgendered. A survey conducted by the Australian Research Centre in Sex, Health and Society found that of the 200 gender nonconforming participants aged 14 to 25, almost two-thirds had experienced verbal abuse and one-fifth had experienced physical abuse in response to their gender presentation. Schools, public streets, and public transportation were the most common locations for the abuse to occur. 90% of the participants who had been abused considered suicide. Additionally, gender diverse people are 4 times as likely to have depression and are more likely to have an eating disorder or PTSD following the abuse. In contrast, when gender nonconforming people are allowed to express themselves, they are more resilient. When parents are supportive, transgender people fare better and have more access to mental health professionals. With increased support of gender neutral language, those that would have never been able to live as themselves in the past may feel more able or may be more willing to live as themselves. So we know that using the correct pronouns and creating a supportive environment has a dramatically positive effect on transgender people. But how much can we really change by simply adjusting our vocabulary? Language is a social practice. We create new words all the time in both positive and negative ways. Repetition of language manifests normativity. If we consider the small ways that we use language every day, we have the power to shift the public opinion and the perception of what normal gender is. As more information is shared and uncovered through research and discussion, gender neutral language will be considered much more normal, just as pants on women was such an unusual sight and is now well within the acceptable social range. Language is a significant component of identity and community. It's how we communicate with others. And therefore, it's integral to our sense of belonging. And it's a language teachers' responsibility to welcome students into that new community and to foster an environment where we all feel that we belong. And that will not be fully possible until every single person, regardless of their gender identity, can be a part of the conversation. So, what are our options? These are the two most popular or well-known examples of non-binary language in Spanish right now. Latinx is a term that was traced back to online forums in the 1990s, and it's generally considered to have been coined by a US-based group of queer Spanish-speaking people. It challenges the gender binary in both language and society and points out the marginalization and violence that it creates. In addition to seeing the X at the end of gendered words in Spanish, it's also common to see words written with both feminine and masculine endings with a slash between them, or to see an at symbol, which is considered to be a combination of both the A and the O. However, this isn't truly non-binary, it's more double-gendered. One argument against Latinx is that the X is an imposition of English language that breaks with Spanish grammar and phonology. Many Spanish speakers feel that Latinx cannot properly identify them, even if they are non-binary, because X is an inherently English sound that is not often found in Spanish. However, those arguments commonly disregard the fact that X has been used in activist circles in Latin America by non-English speaking people for quite some time. Another option is pronoun ella, which dates back to 1976. The letter E is often the closest linguistic element to a gender-neutral suffix. The benefit of using E as a gender-neutral vowel is the ability to create a non-binary pronoun. By changing the O or the A at the end of AO or ella, AA is made. The pronoun ella can be used like any other Spanish pronoun. For example, if amigo is a male friend and amiga is a female friend, estudiante is both a male and a female student. Currently, gender is assigned to words like estudiante with that E through the article that it's paired with, el estudiante or la estudiante. So the benefits of Latinx is that it helps dismantle the generic masculine that Spanish possesses. In this way, it's much more of a feminist term and talks about the equality between the sexes and represents prior social movements. However, it is controversial in the Spanish community because it's hard to pronounce. AA is easy to use and adheres to grammar standards that Spanish speakers are already familiar with, and it's truly a non-binary pronoun that's not associated with a gendered social movement like feminism. However, it's less widely known than Latinx and introduces a fundamental linguistic change that might not be accepted by everyone. So, both Latinx and Latine, or the X and the E, are considered to be direct non binary language. This is where the writer or speaker can expressly use non binary language, even if it doesn't fit the cultured standards. Indirect non binary language is another thing that we can use to help environments feel more inclusive. So, in this sense, we just rephrase the sentence to take out the gender. So, going forward, what should we do? To create a world where gender diversity is understood and respected, we should start in our schools. Continuing to ignore or intentionally cut non binary identity from courses will simply delay the conversation, leaving those outside of the binary without resources they need to thrive. The nature of modern schooling puts world language teachers in a precarious position. To teach Spanish, a highly gendered language, in an inclusive manner is difficult, but it's not an impossible task. A Spanish teacher who promotes gender inclusivity serves as a doorway or a guide into a new community that can help non binary students navigate life. Teaching Spanish students that non-binary identity and current global about the non-binary identity and the current global discussion of, in the interaction of that identity and the language that they're learning could literally save lives. The existence of non binary gender identity is not erased by the current grammatical rules of Spanish, only hidden. It is the role of the world language teachers and administrators to help lift that veil and to make their classrooms more inclusive. Supportive school environments, including a high number of supportive staff, intervention in harassment, and staff participation in ally training, significantly enhances school policies and interventions and is associated with reduced overall bullying. Schools with at least one safe schools with at least one safe school intervention are associated with more positive student perceptions of safety, decreased sexual prejudice, lower levels of truancy, increased awareness of harassment, more supportive environment, and fewer suicide attempts, as well as lower rates of victimization. Schools should be safe for every student, regardless of their gender identity. Language is the basis of community, and it's how we build each other up and tear each other down. Love and fear and spread information. Language connects us, writer to reader, speaker to listener, and we must recognize the power that language has over our perception and our thoughts in order to harness that power for social progress. Together, through language, we can foster a community of acceptance and appreciation, and we can connect to more people, experience more, feel more. Spanish, a language with such rich history and beauty, shouldn't be used to restrict and deny self actualization. Language teachers may have once served as guardians or protectors of linguistics, but in the age of inclusivity and peace, they must serve as a doorway into community. Una comunidad para todos. Thank you.